I'll take notes, but anyone is welcome to help out in here, of course. Oh, hi, Francesca.
Oh, I made it.
So again, let's wait to 1 past, and we start. Okay, so welcome everyone to this interim meeting of the core working group. I'm Marco Tiloca, my co-chairs are Jaime Jimenez and Karsten Bormann. And as usual, the not well applies, and this is an official IETF meeting. We've been recorded. Be sure to be familiar with the not well if you're not already. It's not only about IPR, it's also about code of conduct, so please be nice and professional with one another. The agenda for today is about 3 documents, problem details, conditional attributes, and DNS over co-op. And we got a request from Bill for an agenda bashing to discuss conditional attributes as first item due to time constraints. We should be okay, but any further bashing to the agenda otherwise? If none, then Bill, the floor is yours, and the slides are available to share. Can you hear me, Bill? Others can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I cannot hear Bill. I could hear him 3 minutes ago. Should have started 3 minutes ago.
Let me try again.
There you are.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there is something happening with my machine, so there is a good chance that something might go wrong, but let's just hope that this is okay now.
Yes, we hear you very well.
Yeah.
Please go ahead and take control of the slides. They are available to share.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So, hello everybody, and I see that we don't have very many participants today, but there's everybody in Jabber. I firstly apologize that I couldn't stay for the whole session, and I needed to start. I needed to start the presentation as the first presenter. So, but let's continue. So I'm going to be presenting the conditional attributes draft, the work that's going on there. The quick update is that a few days ago we were draft version 02, and now we have moved up to 04. The reason being that as soon as I updated to 03, there was another addition that was sent to the document, and then I incorporated that just in time for today's meeting. So version 03 had something to do with the parameter names, and then version 04 has this reference code. And to take the least of the two first, the reference code was simple update. It's just the previous code was from the old Dynlink draft. It existed for a while, and then the other thing also was that we changed the parameter type of band and so on, so that it was a presence parameter rather than one with a Boolean value. So Michael updated the draft. We included the functionality of age inside the draft as well. Well, I mean, cell reference code as well. So not very controversial, quite straightforward. And then the next part was about the parameter names. And I wasn't here at the last interim meeting. We didn't have a discussion, but in the IETF 113, we were discussing about the parameter names in conditional attributes. And there were some opinions here and there. So some people were kind of okay with anything. Some persons assume that there will be some possibilities in future that there might be some overlaps in the way the names are used, and there might be some clash.
Bill is gone for me.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear Bill.
Okay, so my microphone just went on mute for some reason. If I could just continue speaking from where I left off, and please let me know if there is a disconnect from my audio. So at the last core meeting, we were talking about the parameter names, and the simplest option seemed to be to amend the attribute names slightly, without calling it a namespace. But anyway, just to prevent any kind of clashes, it seemed the best thing to do is to prepend something to the parameter name. So I decided that maybe c dot something might be nice. So pmin becomes c dot pmin, and so on down the list. And that's the only change I made to the draft. And that's all that's been done. Otherwise, all the issues have been resolved. So if this is okay with everybody, then we should be moving to working group last call. Thank you.
So do you suggest what C dot means? You suggest an
No.
expansion?
No, I don't.
So
It's
is this
just a name.
core or conditional or?
No, it's just easier than ca dot something, because I just thought that we just save one character.
Yeah. Yeah, you could also use question mark, something like
You
that.
can, yes, you can say anything.
Maybe it's not the best character to use.
What would you suggest, Carsten?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I think C dot is fine, but
Right.
yeah. So that will be an FAQ.
I suppose it will. Yeah. We might have to, of course, answer some questions about that. But essentially, it was just a name. It was just a character picked at random, and it seemed to be a nice one, considering we have so many things starting with C.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the next draft that picks up on this convention is going to do, if they also will be using C or maybe using a different one. And maybe we could warn a little bit on how we plan to use this in the future. I mean, this is infraction on the front law of the server developer, obviously. Forget the BCP number. And so we will do this with a lot of restraint.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just a meta comment. It doesn't in no way influences the progress of this draft.
Yeah, I think we will have to wait for comments from others as well, and then see if there is a need for change here. But essentially, it was just the simplest thing to do to prevent any kind of like overlaps in future. Of course, if somebody decides to do that, then they anybody can use these names, of course. But this seemed to be the most obvious way of doing this right now.
Yeah, there's also a comment in the chat from Michael. This pattern looks sort of official. I agree.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Any more comments, questions for Bill? And then I think indeed the natural step here is to start the working group last call on this document for 2 weeks. So we started today, ending on Wednesday 25. So I'll
Sounds good.
open the call on the list after this meeting, and then please provide your feedback and comment there.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Bill, for this work.
Thank you. Thanks for accommodating me today.
Sure. All right. Next to the following document, we have Karsten for problem details.
Okay. May 10th. Yeah. Okay, so we had a pretty good discussion about this 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to quickly remind people what this was about. There is an RFC 7807 that gives some structure that you can use to send back with an error response what that error response actually is about. So, for instance, if you have a shopping application or an application to start some action that costs money, you could have someone trying to buy something that they don't have enough balance on their account to pay for. Excuse me. And then you could receive this problem detail statement, and this has a number of standard components, type, title, detail, instance, and a few application-specific components like balance and accounts. And this is being used by 3GPP. And because 3GPP also wants to be able to do similar things in the CoAP CBOR environment, they were expecting that we were going to finish our problem details document, which has been sitting there since July 2020, waiting for the completion of Coral. And they really need this like next month. So we agreed to quickly finish this in a way that hopefully will still show a way forward to doing this in Coral at some point in time. But we cannot expect Coral to be done next month. So we discussed two approaches last meeting, and there was a little more discussion after the meeting, and there's also a ton of discussion in the RFC 7807 BIS GitHub repository, because the HTTP API group is discussing what the next version of that document would be. And it's really very interesting to see that they try to get by without a registry. And that has turned out to be very problematic. So we decided whatever we want to do will probably make use of a registry. And in particular, the type element, the type member, excuse me, of the JSON map has turned out to be problematic, because that's a URI actually, structurally, but people actually put simple strings there and without knowing implicitly invoke URI resolution, UI reference resolution, and get weird results from that and so on. So we really decided we didn't need that type thing. What we need is something called custom problem details entries, which not just gives the type, but also all these other things, the balance and the account from this example. These are really things that only mean anything in the context of that type. So it's probably a better idea to actually define them in the same environment in which the type itself is being created. So this is a little bit like a CWT in the end. There we also have a map with members that can be registered. And the interesting point here, like CWT, you can have multiple elements. I'm saying element again. Multiple members of that map, which are registered separately from each other, but that combine into a reasonable picture of the problem. So you might have a general custom problem details entry for the status of your account, and then you might have a specific entry that comes with that explains how that status of the account didn't quite make the execution of the request possible. So that there is something a little bit like multiple inheritance going on here, but without all the problems that has in a programming language. And that can turn out to be a quite useful way to actually factor the problem detail space. So this is an example I had the last time. That hasn't changed. So the idea is that we have some standard problem details that have negative numbers, title, detail, and instance, for instance. And we have registered problem details that have non-negative numbers, unsigned numbers as their map keys. And these numbers 0 and 1, these are actually defined in the specification that is used for registering 4711. So they are not themselves registered because they are nested in the namespace of where the 4711 is being registered, but yeah, they can be defined by whoever registers 4711. And there is an interesting little problem that I think we're not discussing in the draft right now. What if that person who has registered 4711 suddenly thinks there should be a number 2 as well? We haven't discussed this, but that's actually a detail that will come up in a minute in a different context. Anyway, because we don't expect everybody to actually register these things, you also can use a URI in place of the registered number. And that means you can actually keep the whole specification to your API documentation and yeah, go ahead and do experimental stuff. So we don't need an experimental range and so on. So generally, documents like the 3GPP documents that actually standardize these things will, of course, go ahead and define tags to be registered, while company X that just wants to build an API internally, that might just use this mechanism here. Okay, and what probably also is worth mentioning is this this example where we use multiple inheritance, where we have a common set of problem details that are sent with every problem detail set. I'm not sure if a process ID and a process name are great examples here. Maybe we should use something else. And something that is specific to using accounts. Yeah, something like this can be used for multiple inheritance or for composition, I should be saying. So this is pretty much what we discussed 2 weeks ago, but we have now written this up and it's in the current draft -03. We also have discussed what happens if somebody has a 7807 specification and really just wants to tunnel this in one of our problem details. And it turns out that's relatively easy because we can just define a custom problem detail entry called 7807. That's the number of that we register for this thing. And that has 2 entries, 0 and 1, that are predefined, which are essentially taking the type and the status that we don't have in the base CORE problem details, because we didn't want to mirror the type thing, and the status is an HTTP status, which is not so useful. So we have a different thing called response code for CORE. But if you really need to show an HTTP status, you can just tunnel this in a 7807 problem, custom problem details entry. So this direction can be done today. The other direction, possibly tunneling CORE problem details instance in a 7807 problem details instance, is a bit difficult because 7807 does not have a registry. So we cannot really indicate whether a problem details object actually does this. Now 7807 bis is going to define a registry. I think that's pretty much decided. So when 7807 bis comes out, we might quickly register the inverse direction of the tunneling, but we cannot really do this now because 7807 bis is still under development, and I think it will become stable only really at the end of this process. So we can do tunneling in one direction, we cannot quite do it in the other direction, but it's pretty clear how we would do this. So yeah, that's essentially the set of things that are really about problem details. But we have one more problem. So when we working with last call this, we definitely should include HTTP API on the list, so they know this is being working with last called and can maybe contribute some more of the wisdom they have accumulated in the 7808 bis process. Again, the GitHub repository is really just amazing. You can learn a lot from there. So there's another problem that is really a CBOR problem, but it's not so surprising that we have this. So in CBOR, we usually do things that are for constrained devices. So we haven't had an actual need in CBOR-based standard yet to support text that is meant for human consumption. And human here is not the developer. We of course have lots of text that is for the developer. But a random end user sitting in Sri Lanka and trying to get a Sinhalese error message and so on. And it turns out that Unicode isn't really that useful in certain regions unless you pair it with language tag. So quite a while ago, Peter Oxel went ahead and registered tag 38 to be able to do this. So there is a tag that has been around for almost a decade now that defines an array of a language tag and a piece of text as a way to do this. And we generally like this thing and would have loved to use it, but there is a problem here because the internationalization people have decided you really cannot infer a writing direction from a language tag. And you really need to read these two references that are on the slide to fully understand why that is the case. So you often can guess the base direction, but this guessing is very ad hoc. It's a little bit like media type sniffing. So you will be right 95% of the time. But you essentially, as a sender of these data objects, you don't have a way to influence the guessing process. So it's better to actually be able to include something that's called base direction in the W3C documents I'm referencing here, and which is essentially LTR, RTL, or nothing which may mean something like auto. So there you give the other end the license to do their sniffing, their guessing process. But if you actually want to say shalom in a problem detail, then you really should be telling people this is a right to left string. And this string is actually really funny because in my editor it's shown left to right, and in the slide presentation software it's shown right to left. So it right there demonstrates the problem while I was editing these slides. Anyway, so this is new. This is something that Tag 38 couldn't do so far. And of course, we could decide, let's just do this completely separate, define a new tag for direction, or actually probably one L2R tag and one R2L tag. That's one way of doing this. The other way is actually including the direction information in the existing array, and 2A and 2B differ in whether we define a new tag for that, let's call that N38, or whether we fix up the existing tag definition to actually include this possibility as well. And that's maybe something that really the CBOR group should be looking at, because so far we haven't done this with tags. We have kept the domain of tags constant. And this would be the first time where we actually fix up a tag definition, at least from the side of an IETF process. The CBOR standard doesn't tell you whether you are allowed to do that. And of course, when we use text in CBOR, we assume that you can use new Unicode characters when they become available. So it's not like we have completely nailed down the set of CBOR documents that can be properly interpreted. But this is in a tag, and again, we haven't done that yet. On the other hand, it's essentially, from the point of view of somebody who tries to do the right thing for internationalization, this is just a severe bug of the existing tag 38 definition. So this would be a bug fix that conveniently gives us the functionality we need here. But that is really required for any proper use of this tag 38. So I would feel much less unhappy with 2B than I would be, for instance, in fixing tag 4, the floating point tag, to actually increase its domain to big num exponents. We have a separate tag for that, that's 264. And that's okay, because different areas of application will be fine with tag 4 or will need the additional complexity of 264. So it's proper to separate that. But here for language tagging, there is no proper use to use a tag for a tag like 38 as it has been defined, because you need to supply the direction information, at least according to the consensus of the people who have been discussing this subject for the last decade or so. Yeah, so the text on this slide is taken right out of the document. So tag 38 would be defined as an array with 2 mandatory and a 3rd optional element. The tag 38 direction would be a false or a true, where false stands for LTR and true stands for RTL. And while we are there, we might actually import the language tag syntax from RFC 5646 into the CDDL, so people can check that if they have a way to check their CBOR documents against CDDL. So the summary from the authors, it's too bad that Thomas cannot be here due to conflict that came up recently. The view from the authors is that this is ready for working group last call.
Thank you, Carsten. Is that really the last slide? Yes.
That is the last slide.
Any comments, questions to Carsten? Especially on this CBOR side. Any early thought on that, Christian, for example? Sounds like a no. Okay, I've read the whole document this morning. I think it is pretty stable, and also considering the urgent schedule, I'm fine with the working group last call. And actually, we may even consider a little shorter than usual one, like terminating on Friday next week, for example, the 20th. That should be still enough time to get comments, and I can provide a review. Would that work for you, Carsten?
Certainly. I think the of all the elapsed terms we use in the IETF, the working group last call period is probably the most sacred. So I'm not sure that we are so urgent that we actually have to violate that. But you could make it so that in the next interim we have the result. So you could make it Tuesday evening or something like that.
Exactly. Then we can close it on the 24th.
Yeah,
that's fine. And yeah, it was the plan already to include CBOR in the loop. As you said, HTTP API will also be put in copy.
Yeah,
that's great. And yeah, you can see from the chat Christian has audio issues, but it take the CBOR point separately in CBOR. As it's done here, I'm good with it. Okay, and he can also review. So we should have 2 reviews at least, otherwise more are welcome. Okay, then we'll start a working group last call on this. And thanks for putting this up so quickly and nice, Carsten and Thomas.
Yeah, Thomas did most of the work, so yeah, thanks go to Thomas specifically.
All right. Thank you, then. And then we can move to Martin for DNS over co-op.
Yeah. Slides. Can you share the slides?
I can, but you are able to, just in case you want to take control. They are available, yeah.
I don't see them.
So go to the thing at the top where there's a hand, and right to the hand. Yep.
Thanks. Sorry.
So now you have to choose your slides.
Okay.
Great.
Sorry. that I'm still not used to this too. Okay, so yeah. Hi, I'm Martin. I want to talk about our draft again, the DNS queries over co-op draft. And so first I give a quick introduction for those who don't know about this, and then go right into the discussion section, basically picking up what we started at the last IETF meeting. So our attack scenario is basically that people can eavesdrop DNS requests, and as a countermeasure, we want to encrypt this. There are, of course, solutions like DOH or DOQ, but as most of you know, this is not feasible for the constrained IoT. So our proposal is to do DNS over co-op and use the encrypted communication that we have there with either DTLS or OSCORE. And this also would give us some additional advantages that by the co-op API, by the core suite, that like blockwise transfer, or that they can share the system resources with the co-op implementation, making thus the implementation of DNS a bit smaller. And yeah, basically from the update perspective, we didn't do much on the draft since IETF, but we did do some evaluation. First of all, about the caching. Last time I spoke here, we presented two options on how to deal with the discrepancy between the co-op max age and the DNS TTL. And this was either do it like DOH or do it like with this what we now call EOL TTLs, where we basically adopt the TTLs to the minimum TTL. So basically one of the TTLs or all of the TTLs are 0. And during our evaluation, we noticed that most of the times, at least in the end user settings, these TTLs are always the same because we always have the same record set. So we have also now a simplified version where we basically just say, okay, take the TTL and set it to 0. And then at the client, we set it to the max age. And of course, this only assumes that there is one record set. Cases where there are multiple record sets is, for examples, in an end user setting, the CNAME, where you have the CNAME. But most of the times, these TTLs are also in sync. So here's our evaluation of this. As you can see in the CDFs, for when there is no caching, most of the methods actually compared. We use different methods other than the ones, the fetch method we presented in the we proposed in the draft, so we can actually see the caching effects. And with the DOH-like approach, we already get see some huge benefits for, of course, get and fetch, where the responses are cacheable. But for post, actually, we see some disadvantages due to the additional overhead. And with EOL TTLs, we actually see a little bit of an advantage of that. The smallness of the advantage is actually because of our setup, because we just had 2 hops, and so there wasn't much that could be optimized. But we get, as I said, there is some advantage because fetch and get profit from it, and the EOL TTLs benefits from the cache validation, where we have 10% more queries received in less than 2 seconds, so within the first retransmissions. With get, because the get gains more benefit because the query actually is fragmented, and with fetch we get about 5% more queries in the first retransmission. Then the other issue I wanted to bring up again is how abstract the draft should be. This was a little bit discussed on the mailing list, that rather than doing some heavy protocol specifications, specify just the REST API that the server needs to implement, and then leave the specifics to the implementations. Carsten interpreted this as that Klaus was only pointing out the so-called restatement anti-pattern. However, when we discussed this a bit between the co-authors, there was some disagreement about this, so that we don't do this, but maybe we do this. So just to bring this up on the discussion again. Yeah, and just to not have them forgotten, but in the interest of time, I didn't mention them here. There's also these other 2 points of do we need consider, observe, and a CBOR-based message content format, which I started a discussion thread on the mailing list as proposed by Marco last time. So are there any questions? Yes, Carsten?
Yeah, on the Zebra-based content format, I think that's a good opportunity to actually factor this out into another document.
Yeah,
So I don't
that
think...
was always the plan.
Okay, good.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So observe would be really interesting. I haven't thought about that very much, but I think that's really great. So one of the we have this project going on where we try to do network security based on MUD specifications, and one of the problems with MUD specifications is that they describe connectivity in terms of DNS names, usually at least. And the problem is, of course, if the IP address behind that DNS name changes, you actually have to change your network filter. And so something like an observe function would be interesting there, but this is more of a research thing right now and not something that we already know how to use operationally. But back to the previous slide. When I talk about the restatement anti-pattern, there is something that is really good for people who are trying to use a new protocol in a new environment, which is giving them examples of how that new protocol works in that new environment. And I wouldn't want to lose those examples. But the danger here and the actual anti-pattern is if the document tries to make normative statements that essentially restate elements of the normative references, because it's just way too easy to subtly change the base standard that you are ostensibly using. And the worst case that can happen is that you actually fork the ecosystem by creating a special version of CoAP that is needed to actually run your protocol. So that's the problem with the restatement anti-pattern. I'm not sure anybody has written this up, but in the time I've been in the IETF, I have seen this multiple times and often with actually ugly results, and so referencing standards have unwittingly changed the reference standard by restating things in there, and so on. So let's try to avoid the restatement anti-pattern. So let's explain this in terms of let's define this in terms of what the CoAP service interface is. But let's also have examples that bring this back to the ground, and so you can have both feet on the ground and see what that actually means. And of course, by doing this as a REST, API is the word I don't like very much, but anyway, doing this by defining this on top of REST patterns, of course, gives you the best reusability of this specification. Yeah, that's just a general advice to draft authors. We have seen exactly the same problem when people were putting EAP on top of CoAP. So they were trying to explain for every EAP message how that is mirrored in a CoAP message. And of course, that means they have to explain all of CoAP again, or they are defining a new protocol that is almost but not entirely unlike CoAP. And we managed to stop that there. And I haven't reread this draft in a while, but I would love if we could avoid running into the same problem here.
I don't think we fall into exactly that trap when it comes to basically forking the standard. Interestingly enough, when it comes to examples, we saw that for DOH, exactly that problem happened when they use the example when you look at the examples, because it seemed that some of the servers basically, or some of the users expected the URL for the DNS resource to be like it is proposed in the examples, even though the actual RFC doesn't say anything about how the URL has to look like. Like I think it was like something like DNS minus query, and so basically every user of DOH now expects the DOH server to present to serve the DNS messages at DNS minus query, even though that isn't in the standard. But so to give some example where the example basically defines the standard somehow. But actually for our example, we lesson learned or from that situation, we tried to make it clear that this is not what we want. And I actually think we use the root resource basically to make this a bit clearer. But other than that, well, we said use fetch, and we said use blockwise transfer when the message is too big. But I don't think we basically said that something that contradicts the actual standard. Maybe with the QBlock option, this could run into problems. But on the other hand, when it comes to REST APIs, defining REST API, I'm a little bit afraid that it then becomes too abstract, and then we have differing doc standards, because while the implementers implement the REST API, how they do it is differing with among the implementations a bit. That's what my fear is when we maybe do it too abstract.
You have to be very definitive in what you actually want to nail down and what you want to leave to the implementation. So generally, we have tried to define interactions on resources and leave it to the server what the exact URI for that resource is going to be. So the entry point is server defined, and we usually then use resource discovery to actually find this place. And since resource discovery meshes nicely with service discovery, this is not just unnecessary overhead, but this is actually useful. So you could go for a multicast request. Is there anyone who has an RT equals something? And then right ahead use that as a DNS resolver. Yeah, what you just should try to avoid is saying, oh, and then a retransmission happens, or this needs to be done in a separate response or something like that. That's fine for an example, but that's not fine for actually defining the protocol.
Yeah, I guess, but we don't do that. But we can go through the draft again and maybe find some ways where we can be more abstract, I guess. But
yeah, if you're already doing this is great. I just wanted to point out that this restatement stuff is happening as it did in the ACE working group with the EAP over CoAP work, and let's try to minimize that as much as possible. And I need to read that thing again.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Well, just please continue the discussion on the, I think, 4 threads we have on the list on the different subtopics.
Yeah. There was sadly little feedback last time, but maybe putting this on the table here again, maybe some more discussions can happen.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't send in a formal review, but I remember seeing the draft, living through it, and being very happy. So I probably need to repeat this exercise.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so the way I see this is that we need a couple of people who do what I just said, and if these reviews point out that this thing is ready for adoption, then we should have another look at our charter and see whether we actually can fully justify why this is in our charter and then adopt it.
Yeah, probably for adoption there need to be also be some to-dos in the draft be extinguished, but I mean that we can do in the next round of the draft.
Yeah, so we don't have to have a to-do free document to adopt it. We definitely have to do a to-do free document to last call it. But if people who review it like the general direction and agree that A, this is something they want to spend energy on completing, and B, it's not going to kill the internet or something like that, then I think we should go ahead. Modular charter.
Yeah. Okay. So from my end, there's not more things to discuss.
So your plan is to do a next version when?
We didn't discuss this right now, but I guess at the latest for the draft cutoff for the IETF 114. Though I'm not sure if we participated, but I guess we will. Yeah. So cutoff for the 114, which I think is in July.
Mid-July or something.
Yeah.
Great. So who will be the reviewers? I will. Who else?
I mean, there was some people already who said during the ITF that they want to review, but we didn't receive any reviews from that. Maybe those people can be reactivated. And I also wanted to ping maybe some DNS op people if they could look over that.
Yeah, I think it's important when you ping the DNS of people to say we are just in the state of adopting this. So tell us where we are completely wrong, but we are not yet looking for the last dot on the I and the cross on the T. I think that's usually important to explain the what they should be expecting.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. So if you remember people who have promised to do reviews and they haven't done that yet, just tell the working group chairs this is very much okay to do, and it's our job to nudge people to put in reviews.
Okay, I will do so.
Thank you, Martin.
Yep.
Any more comments?
Thank you.
All right, then we are in the AOB. Any other things you want to discuss in core today? Sounds like a no. So we start the 2 last calls and we talk latest in 2 weeks. Thank you all for today.
Talk to you then. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.